welcome to Downtown. I'm your host, Robbie Haig, and today I am talking with Ann Mason, who is Executive Director of the Antiquarian Society in Plymouth. Thank you for spending some time with us, Ann.
Thanks for having me, Robbie.
It's a pleasure. So the Antiquarian Society is a grouping of more than one building. Mm-hmm. So if you want to start there or tell us a little bit about Ann Mason and who Ann Mason is.
Sure.
We'd like that too.
Okay, great. So the Antiquarian Society is Plymouth's historical society. We like to think of ourselves as the historical society. We interpret everyday life in Plymouth over the past 300 years, 300 plus years.
Right.
So we have 3 historic houses. The Harlow House is our oldest house, and it's actually, in one of its interior rooms is pictured here. It was built in 1677. Then we have an 18th century house, the Spooner House, and then our 19th century house is the Hedge House, which is on Water Street, right on the Plymouth waterfront.
Oh, it's the big, gorgeous thing.
It's the big, gorgeous federal mansion.
On plenty of grass.
Yeah, we have a large lawn stretching down to the Water Street. But we, so in these 3 houses, we have collections of domestic artifacts. We have a large historic clothing collection, and we really want to bring to life the history of Plymouth, and not so much in Plymouth focuses on the Pilgrims and the Mayflower arrival, but we're really looking in the centuries after that, and sharing local history with the community and with, of course, summer visitors as well.
Mm-hmm. How did this all get started, Ann?
Well, that's a great question, because we are almost 100 years old. We were founded in 1919 by a group of local women. And they were concerned because they saw a lot of old houses and buildings in Plymouth being torn down. And one building that was threatened with demolition was the Hedge House. Its last resident had passed away. The town had acquired the property, and they were actually looking to use the property to build what's now Memorial Hall, a large event venue, and the purpose of the building was to commemorate veterans of wars in Plymouth's past. Wow. So the town was just planning to demolish the house that was on the property. And this group of women got together and said, we can't let that happen. It's a beautiful federal mansion.
Yay, women.
Yes, yay, women. A lot of historic preservationists in the 19th century and the early 20th century were women. Mm-hmm. And so they got together, they raised the money necessary to move the house and to find a place of land to put it. And so actually it's diagonally right behind Memorial Hall, so it's right behind its original location, but it was lifted up and rotated around, so now it faces the water.
And it amazes me how they can move such a large house.
Yes, they did. They actually cut it into 3 pieces.
Okay,
so they moved it in smaller chunks, but it was still quite the endeavor. So that was where we got our start. And then people started giving us things for the collection, so that we were acquiring local objects from different families. We're not just exclusively Plymouth, mostly we focus on Plymouth, but we have some artifacts from surrounding communities as well. And the Harlow House was the second house the Society acquired in 1920. So we've just kept expanding since then.
Mm-hmm. And the Harlow House, there are a lot of Harlows still around, mm-hmm. Am I correct?
There are, absolutely. There is actually a group called the Harlow Family Association, and they are all descendants of William Harlow, who built the house, and they're still active in our organization and in learning about their ancestors' history and preserving that history. And they have a family reunion every year in August.
Isn't that awesome?
Yep, right at the Harlow House.
Yeah, yep. They have a breakfast at the Harlow House too.
Yes, we just had our Pilgrim Breakfast, which has been a tradition for 85 years, if you can believe it. It's one of those events that has a long tradition. We serve fish cakes and baked beans, as you know, because Robbie was there helping us. But
it was really good.
It was fun. It was a hot day, but it was fun.
Yeah.
Yep. And one thing that's neat about working with the Antiquarian Society is I am actually a descendant of William Harlow.
You are?
So I am, yes.
Oh,
so it's
good.
really neat to think about. I grew up in Plymouth and have a lot of family ties, and so it's a really close family tie to work at the Harlow House and to work with the other Harlow family members.
Yeah. Have you always wanted to be a historian?
For quite a while, yes. My parents were very good about exposing me to history. We would take family trips and visit historic sites, and so I was always aware of my family history, of local history, and always found it very fascinating.
Good.
And so I always think that history is a good subject to study because you can learn everything. You can, think about the history of science and the history of philosophy and ideas, and of course politics and the military history. There's just so many different branches of history. So.
And even since my association with the Antiquarian Society, just the history of people.
Right.
The people in the houses.
The everyday people.
Amazing.
Just, I think in some ways that's really easy to relate to, because we have friends and family, and we live in communities, and then to uncover the past and see how people's lives were different and how in some ways they were similar to ours,
Sure.
it really makes that connection.
And as they say, everybody's got a story.
Everybody has a story, that's right.
And do they know where Mr. Harlow came from?
No, they don't. No, we know he was English, but we don't have a record of where in England he was born or when he arrived in the colonies. He just sort of starts popping up in the historic record, and then we do, of course, know sort of the end of his life, and he ended in Plymouth in 1691.
Very good. Now, how about the Spooner House?
The Spooner House is actually my favorite house, and I probably shouldn't say that, but it very much feels like a home to me. And one reason for that is because it was home to the Spooner family for about 200 years. The last Spooner who lived there was James Spooner, and he died in the 1950s, and he wanted to leave his house as a museum because even in his lifetime he had invited people to come in and to see the objects there and to learn about the history. And so he left it as a museum, and the Antiquarian Society ended up taking it on, and it became our museum. But what's special about it is that James Spooner left all of the contents of the house to remain with the house. And so you have 200 years of family objects. They're not set up by period, so we have different periods mixing with each other throughout the house. It's basically left the way James Spooner had it, so it does very much feel lived in, and it really feels quite special when you go in there.
I haven't become familiar with that one yet, but I promise I will.
Good. Yes, you'll have to come to visit.
So you have happenings around town based around the houses, and what are some of the things that are happening?
So our houses are always open for tours in the summer. So the Harlow House is open on Tuesdays from 11 to 3, and that's always free to the public. The Hedge House and Spooner houses are there's a minimum admissions fee. If you're a Plymouth resident, you get in for free, but for adults it's $6. Those are open. Hedge is open Wednesdays through Sundays, 2 to 6 p.m. And Spooner is open Thursdays and Sundays, 2 to 6 p.m. So we're staggered throughout the week, so it gives more opportunity to see one of the houses. Yep. And then we have different special events that happen. So at the Hedge House is sort of our prominent location. We have Acoustic Nights concert series. So we had one concert in July. We're having another one in a few weeks on August 11th, and then another one in September. And this is a venue for local musicians to play their music, perform for the public, and those concerts are free. So we are very thankful for the organizers of the concerts, and this is their 11th season. So we've been offering these concerts for quite a while, and it's a great location. The backdrop is the Hedge House, and then you're sitting right there on the lawn overlooking the water as well.
It's a beautiful area.
It is, yeah. And then actually also on the Hedge lawn on August 19th, we are hosting the Brown Box Theater Company, who is coming to do a free performance of Shakespeare's As You Like It. And this is presented in partnership with the Plymouth Cultural District. So we are just delighted to have that performance happening there. So I always love Shakespeare, especially when it's performed outside. So we're hoping for a good crowd to come for that on August 19th.
Very good.
And our big event of the summer, one of our big events, is our summer fair. And again, this has been a tradition for many, many years for the Antiquarian Society. It's a major fundraiser for us, but it's also a lot of fun. So we have a big tent set up on the lawn. Our members donate different objects. Some of them are antique, some of them are vintage items, some of them are newer items. And we have an old-fashioned summer sort of New England fair with different tables set up with those objects for sale. We have a ladies' table with lots of jewelry. We have a bake table with a lot of homemade goodies, and then some craft areas and a raffle as well. So it's a fun day. It's the same day as the Plymouth Waterfront Festival, so it's a very busy Saturday, August 25th. Busy day on the waterfront, but a lot of fun and good shopping to be had.
And what fascinates me about the Plymouth area is that people work together. It's quite a network, you know. It's not one building doing something without benefit of the other.
Right.
It's just community.
Yeah, it is a very special community. We have so many wonderful, particularly historic resources in our community, and so we do collaborate. The Antiquarian Society will work with the Pilgrim Hall Museum, we'll work with Plymouth Plantation, we'll try to do activities together that really promote the history of the community and bring people together. And we're very fortunate to have many wonderful volunteers who
Here's my next question.
who help us do our work, fulfill our mission. So, you know, whether it's working in the gardens or working at events, working with our educational programs, even we have volunteers at the Harlow House who do the tours there for us. So it's a very important element of our work is supported by our members and our volunteers.
And many of them dress in period costumes, which I think is fun.
Yeah, at the Harlow House they do dress in 17th century, late 17th century costume. It's not first-person interpretation, but it is. It sort of helps imagine what life was like. For some of our special events, we also encourage even the visitors to wear costumes. So in June, we had a Jane Austen tea, and that's always a lot of fun to wear your Regency costumes. And of course, Jane Austen was writing in England at the same time that the Hedge House was a new home in Plymouth. So if you're a fan of Jane Austen, it's a great place to visit because you can sort of just imagine life in that early 19th century.
Very good. And also, I'd like to mention that when the breakfast is happening, the children dress in period costumes and serve and Yep. So
really
nice.
That's an element of that breakfast that's been going on for 85 years,
Amazing.
And we always recruit some of our junior members, some of the children and grandchildren of our members, and they wear their costumes. We're fortunate that some of them have been serving with us since they were, maybe 6, and they were started out by selling the little flower bouquets we have, and now they've graduated to actually serving the guests at their tables. So it very much makes it a community event and a very family-friendly event.
Very pleasant.
Yeah.
Very pleasant. Everybody working together. What else happens with the now? A question that I want to ask you is about the Fragment Society. Is that also part of the Antiquarian group?
No, that's a separate organization.
Okay.
But we have a lot of overlapping memberships, and we have historically. The Fragment Society is a group in Plymouth that was founded in 1818, so they just celebrated 200 years. Yeah. And they were founded as a charitable aid association. They were a group of women who came together and were concerned about the increasing levels of poverty within the community. This was the early 19th century. Following the War of 1812, there had been a great deal of disruption economically, of course, politically, and people were feeling that. And so they came together and they were looking for ways that they could help their community. And ever since 1818, they've continued serving the community in that way. Initially, they were helping out by making clothes for people, offering those clothes to them, or they would actually have a set of bedding that they would lend to people, since textiles were incredibly expensive in the early 19th century. And so that was one way they were helping. They would provide allowances for fuel or for food. In more recent years, they've helped sort of people pay their rent. It's always as an emergency. It's one of those things where if someone is at a critical point and they don't know where to turn, even with all of the different safety nets we have in place in the 21st century, sometimes there's still those needs where people say, I can't pay my rent this month, and is there any way you could help me? And they are there to accept applications and see if they can help those needs.
Still caring. Yeah. And I have met some within the Antiquarian Society that are part of the...
Right. And many, so actually one special thing is that the first vice president of the Fragment Society was Esther Hammett, and she was actually one of the earliest residents of what we call the Hedge House. So the Hedge House was actually built by William Hammett in 1809. Esther was his wife. She was vice president of the Fragment Society, and the Fragment Society had some of their earliest meetings in what we call the Hedge House. So it's interesting to think about how, what actually happened in the rooms, that they were lived in, people gathered there, they talked about ideas, they talked about making their community a better place, and so it's very, very exciting to still have that connection. Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
I think that's why I thought it was part of the Antiquarian.
Yep.
Now there was some work done on the Hedge House also, if I'm not mistaken. Did it originally have 3 floors?
So when the Hammett family built the house, they built the main block, has 2 floors only, and the ceilings are very high. They're about 9 feet high, which is unusual for a New England house. Most New England homes of that period want to have lower ceilings so that you can keep the heat at the human level in the winter.
Yankee ingenuity.
Right. But William Hammett was building a home that was really a showcase. He was showcasing how much wealth he has. He was showing off, his good taste and style. So he had these enormous ceilings. When the Hedge family moved into the house in the 1830, they built an addition that is still on the house today. But they wanted to have more rooms. So instead of building just 2 floors in the addition, they built 3 floors. They didn't want to change the roof line of the original house or have a higher roof line in the back. So what they did is they dropped the ceiling height. So if you go from the original house with its 9-foot ceilings into the rooms in the addition, they are lower ceilings to accommodate 3 floors instead of 2.
And when you first look at the house, you don't realize that there are 3 windows in one section and 3 windows tall, I mean, and 2 on the others.
Right. It's one of those things where you, sometimes when you enter a home, you realize, oh, this is bigger than I thought, or it's shaped differently than I thought, and so it's very special.
Beautiful house.
Yeah.
So what is coming up with the Antiquarian Society that we can talk about today?
Well, one thing I wanted to mention was our Poppies project. So we are 2018 is the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I. So World War I ended in Europe on November 11th, 1918. So November 11th, which of course is Veterans Day, celebrated as Veterans Day here in the United States, will mark the 100th anniversary. And we wanted to do something special to commemorate that. And so we are actually having a small display in the Hedge House of World War I era nurses' uniforms. So those are in our historic clothing collection, local nurses who served in France during World War I. So we'll have those uniforms on display and a few other objects. But then on the front lawn, either of the Hedge House or perhaps on one of our other properties, we are planting a field of poppies. And the poppy has been a symbol of remembrance for those who served in conflicts or who died, who lost their lives serving in the military, really ever since World War I. And there is actually an organization that started in Australia, creating poppies, either knitting them or crocheting them, and then having them displayed in outdoor spaces. So instead of actually planting real poppies, we are going to be assembling these knit and crocheted poppies and having them on the lawn so that it will be very visually stunning. So we're hoping that will be put into place around Veterans Day of this year, and really to commemorate those who died in World War I, but also as a tribute to all those who've served in military conflicts or peacekeeping operations from Plymouth County. So thinking about that connection.
Right. Yeah. And I do remember that it all started in Flanders Field, the poppy group. So I'm thinking that possibly that's why they're doing them out on the lawn.
Right.
Very good.
Right. Yep.
Excellent.
Yep.
Very nice.
And actually, so we are asking volunteers, whether they're in Plymouth or really they could be anywhere. We are accepting donations of poppies. So the patterns, we have the patterns for crocheting them or knitting them. And then, so if you crochet and knit 1 or 2 or 2 dozen, you can send them back to us, and we will then assemble them and put them on the lawn. Mm-hmm.
Very good, very good. Well, I think we have covered a great deal. Mm-hmm. If there's anything else that we haven't covered that you'd like to talk about, this is the time.
I don't think so. I would just say that we have our website is PlymouthAntiquarianSociety.org. So if people have questions about upcoming events or about the Poppies project, they can check there, and there's information there.
I just thought of something that I did want to bring up, and that is that Mr. Harlow, was a barrel maker. Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
Yeah, he was a cooper. Yep. So he made barrels. He made all sorts of round objects out of wood, like buckets. Yep.
And here we have a sampling of a barrel.
Yep. So these are actually reproduction barrels that were made for us when the house reopened. It underwent a major restoration about 10-15 years ago now, and so we have restored the house. And we have these reproduction barrels there to demonstrate William Harlow's coopering trade. We are also hoping in 2020, which of course is Plymouth's 400th anniversary year, we will hopefully have some coopering demonstrations that we'll be able to do. So that's something to look forward to, that we'll be having a full calendar of events in 2020 that particularly highlight our 17th century property, the Harlow House.
Wonderful. Yeah. Well, I was, you think of a barrel like that as a whiskey barrel. Mm-hmm. You think of it as holding liquids, which is fantastic. Mm-hmm. They had to be made to perfection to hold liquids. Right. But they also use them for solids. And that amazed me. Right.
You'd use them for everything because, of course, this is a period before plastic, before cardboard. Right. So you would need some kind of containers to hold either solids or liquids, and they might obviously take on different shapes and sizes depending on what they were being used for.
Sure. And the barrels were used on ships too, were they not?
Yep. And it was obviously easy to transport them because you could roll them, which is huge. Sure. Even when they're empty, they're very heavy. Yes. If they're full, you couldn't lift them by yourself. So if you can roll them up a ramp onto a ship, that would make a big difference.
Very good. Yeah. Very good. Well, thank you for that. Yeah. And we look forward to Music on the Lawn at the Hedge House coming up twice during the summer.
2 more concerts, one in August and one in September.
Very good. And I thank you for being here with us and telling us about all of the treasures.
Thank you for
the treasures, of course, being the buildings.
Yep, the buildings, the things inside of them, and then the stories themselves. Yep.
Very good. Yeah. Oh, and Dr. Ann Mason, I am just reminded myself that you also do tours of the burial ground.
We do.
With someone from Plymouth Pilgrim Hall.
So in 2011, the Antiquarian Society started doing free tours of Burial Hill the first Saturday of every month. And since 2 years ago, we started doing them in partnership with Pilgrim Hall Museum. So our 2 organizations present them. Every month is a different speaker, a different tour guide speaking on a different theme. So it's not just, the tour is not the same every month. It's always on a different theme. This coming August, the first Saturday in August, the theme will actually be on epitaphs. So epitaphs are those verses that appear on gravestones, and just Dr. Donna Curtin from Pilgrim Hall Museum will be leading that tour, and she'll be talking about some of the unusual epitaphs and some of the more common epitaphs that you see fairly frequently. And so it's a way to look more closely at the gravestones and really think about the people and the times that they lived in and the cultures that surrounded those customs.
Very good. And it's another example of the community pulling together and working together.
Yep.
So, and it's I've been to many of the programs, and I would recommend them to anybody.
I always learn something. I learn it when I'm preparing the tour because I'm doing the research, and then even when I attend the talk of someone else, it's really neat to learn.
Amazing.
There's so many different layers of history and stories that you can learn.
Very good. Well, again, thank you for being here, Anne.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you. And thank you people out there for watching. This is your host, Robbie Haig, for Downtown. And I hope to see you again real soon.